In this lecture, we're going to be talking about the Battle of Pharsalus. We'll begin by looking at the circumstances of this final confrontation between Caesar and Pompey's eventual defeat. And then look at Caesar's activities in Egypt with Cleopatra, and then his movement north to North Africa and Spain, dealing with the surviving Pompeians, and finally Caesar's return to Rome in 45 BC and his accomplishments as dictator. So Pharsalus. This is where Caesar and Pompey met in pitched battle in Greece. They met in August of 48, and Caesar won a decisive victory. But there was nothing leading up to this that was going to suggest that Caesar would emerge from this confrontation victorious, and in many ways, he never should have won. He had extraordinary difficulty getting his troops over to Greece. Bibulus, his former co-consul, was in charge of the blockade for the Pompeians, and half of Caesar's troops couldn't make the crossing. So Caesar was severely undermanned. He really didn't have very much by way of supplies. His troops were hungry. They were not in good shape. He was desperate for reinforcements, but he couldn't get reinforcements over to Greece. And really, Pompey had the advantage. Pompey very wisely took the tack of really just waiting Caesar out, that he was going to let the troops starve. He recognized his advantage, but it was, in fact, the Senate, the optimates in the Senate, that were begging Pompey to engage in a confrontation. And this was really what led to Pompey's defeat, was the fact that he attacked Caesar rather than just waiting Caesar out. And Caesar ends up defeating Pompey. Pompey escapes the battle alive and survives to run off to Egypt, but his forces are absolutely defeated in Pharsalus. Caesar offers mercy, clementia, to Pompey's supporters. So anybody who asked for mercy got it. And Caesar was famous for this virtue of clementia. As we'll see, it will come back to cause him harm, but it's something that he claimed as a special virtue of himself. Cicero was one of the beneficiaries of this Caesarian clementia. He and other senators who had been with Pompey in Greece returned to Italy. Others of the Pompeians fled to North Africa. So Cato, as well as Pompey's sons. And Pompey still had a lot of supporters in North Africa, and as we'll see also in Spain. Pompey himself goes to Egypt, and on the left-hand side you have an illuminated manuscript, and this is supposed to be showing the battle of Caesar and Pompey. I'm pretty sure no white horses were involved, but, this is the medieval imagination. So Pompey basically never gets off the boat. He lands in Egypt, and as soon as he steps ashore, he's immediately killed, and sort of famously beheaded in Egypt. Caesar, who is chasing him, arrives shortly after, arrives in Alexandria, and walks straight into a family squabble. The Ptolemies, who are the ruling family in Egypt, are having a dispute over who is going to be the king of Egypt, or the queen of Egypt, the supreme ruler. And Caesar gets dragged into this, asked to intervene, to decide. And this is when Cleopatra, who is one of the Ptolemies, trying to seize power, basically seduces Caesar, so the story goes, in order to be declared the queen of Egypt. But the end result is that the two of them form a kind of alliance, and it may be as much political as personal, and Caesar makes Cleopatra the ruler of Egypt in place of her brother, and her brother is eventually killed. Clearly, Caesar and Cleopatra's relationship is more than just political, because she gives birth to a son, Ptolemy Caesar, while Caesar is in Egypt, and there's never any question that Caesar is the father of this child. And here on the right-hand side, the picture that just came up on your slide, is Elizabeth Taylor as Cleopatra. we have no surviving visual representations that we can firmly identify as Cleopatra. We have no idea what she really looked like, but legend has it that she was incredibly beautiful, a seductress. Certainly she manages to look after her political future by seducing first Caesar and then Mark Antony. So Caesar, after he gets Cleopatra on the throne in Egypt, ends up leaving Egypt and dealing with the Pompeians who have survived the confrontation at Pharsalus. Before he leaves the east, though, he has a confrontation with the son of Mithridates, Pharnaces of Pontus. And Pharnaces had decided that sort of in the midst of this quarreling between Caesar and Pompey, this would be maybe a good opportunity to take back Pontus as his own sort of family dynasty. And Caesar steps in and says, nope, not going to happen, and defeats Pharnaces and his forces. And it's in this battle when Caesar very famously says, "Weni witty wiki, I came, I saw, I conquered." This is a famous saying. It's a good thing to know. You can deploy this in a variety of contexts, walking out of an exam, for instance. But this was the context in which Caesar originally said it. In September 47, he returns to Italy and leaves then from Italy to North Africa to deal with these Pompeians who had retreated there after Pharsalus. And in North Africa, he's able to successfully deal with them, to defeat the holdouts. But some of them, and in particular and most famously Cato, commit suicide. And so the image on the left-hand side of your screen is Cato holding sort of in one hand the dagger, in another hand the book roll, in the garb of the philosopher. So sort of the thoughtful Cato, he's this symbol of republicanism, and he's going to kill himself rather than come under Caesar's control. And this is a very famous moment. He's going to stab the knife through his chest, very much as Dido did, also in North Africa. So there's a kind of reminiscence there as well. And Cato gets remembered as a hero of all things Republic. He's a symbol of the death of the Republic, in fact. We'll have more of them, but Cato is sort of the first of these political suicides. Caesar then moves on to Spain to deal with the Pompeians that are hiding out there. In fact, he ends up fighting a pretty serious battle, the Battle of Munda, where the sons of Sextus Pompey have managed to marshal serious forces against Caesar, and it's no given that Caesar's going to come out of this alive, much less victorious. And so the fact that he does is really remarkable, and is a sign, yet again, of his abilities in the military context to sort of suppress his enemies. And so in 45, the Battle of Munda is fought. It's an absolute bloodbath, and really the only real survivor of it on the Pompeian side is Pompey's son Sextus Pompey, and he'll come back into our narrative a bit later, but important to know, he survives Munda to live another day. But this was really the last of the holdouts. And after Munda, Caesar now really controls the Western Mediterranean. It's completely under his power. And here we have Angelina Jolie. This is a famous Helmut Newton portrait, but posing in the guise of the sort of Roman philosopher committing suicide for his cause. I'm pretty sure that's not what Angelina Jolie's thinking. She just liked knives famously, but this is for your enjoyment. So some review questions. You can press pause, go over these at your own pace, and resume the lecture when you're ready. So, having defeated the last of the Pompeians in the Western Mediterranean, in North Africa and in Spain, Caesar returns to Italy. in 45 BC. Now, what's interesting about this return is that he's really only planning to be there temporarily. He's there to deal with matters in Italy. Italy's basically just been left to its own devices since his march 4 years earlier in 49. Everything has been happening in the east, and he's been dealing with subduing the Pompeians. And so there's been a Senate in Italy, but really there's not sort of been great leadership in Rome, and things are pretty chaotic. So he returns planning to get things under control, especially deal with social matters of social welfare, and then plans his next campaign against the Parthians. He's going to recapture the standards that Crassus had lost when he was soundly defeated by the Parthians. But we know from Caesar's activities, and in particular the fact that he had arranged commands for 3 years, that he really did plan to be away for several years dealing with the Parthians. But he's only in Rome temporarily to manage these social matters, and then to move on to deal with the Parthians in the east. In Rome, he first of all takes on the matter of debt. There is an enormous economic crisis at this point. There are a huge number of people in debt. They cannot possibly even make the interest payments. And the debt collectors who want their money and are confiscating property and such. And so Caesar needs to intervene in this. And you can read about the details of his intervention in your textbook. But the important thing to get out of that is not so much the details as the fact that Caesar takes on what is a serious problem, and it's something that is going to continually threaten the stability of the Republic. And he tries to find a solution that is a compromise, that makes the debtors happy, or at least able to continue to pay their debts, and makes the debt collectors happy. So the debts aren't all just being forgiven. And again shows the extent to which Caesar often resorted to compromise to try to solve problems. Perhaps most famously, he reforms the calendar. He creates what's called the Julian calendar. And this is the calendar that would endure until the 16th century, when it was replaced by the Gregorian calendar. But in many ways, lots of elements of the Julian calendar survive in the Gregorian calendar. Particularly, Caesar was motivated by the fact that by 45, the Roman year and the solar year had been completely separated. So there was about a 3-month difference, which meant that, you were getting snow in July and heat waves in December. So there had been a practice of inserting months, intercalation it was called, at various times in order to make up for the differences in the Roman calendar and the solar calendar. But this hadn't been done regularly in several years, and so this great gap had happened. So what Caesar does is just rationalize the calendar. He adopts the Egyptian solar calendar and creates, 1 year has, I think, 455 days or something, but a very long year. And then after that, each year will have just the 365 days with one extra February 23rd every 4 years. And so you can see there the roots of our modern calendar, the Gregorian calendar, already in place in the Julian calendar. He also settles his veterans in overseas colonies. And the reason he does this is to alleviate concerns that he's going to engage in land confiscation or proscriptions. There was still a lot of memory of this happening under Sulla. Caesar did things that were reminiscent of Sulla. So he's very careful to make it clear that he's not another Sulla, that he's not going to abuse the Italian people. He does settle some veterans in Italy, so there's clearly a little bit of confiscation going on, but for the most part, he settles the veterans overseas. He also founds colonies in Carthage and Corinth. These were both territories that had been captured by Rome in 146 BC, but hadn't really been developed. And Caesar starts the process of developing these into Roman colonies. He won't live long enough to finish it, but he's the one that's given credit for starting it. He also limits the grain dole. So the grain dole that Clodius had made free, he now limits it. So he doesn't get rid of it entirely, but he takes some of the pressures off of the Roman treasury by limiting the extent to which the grain is subsidized. He deals with the problem of the publicani, and this problem of overbidding on tax collection, also on abuse by the publicani, by having now provincial communities collect their own taxes. And partly the idea here is that this will put an end to some of the worst abuses of the provinces, and possibly he was thinking this would be partly a way to start to build up loyalty of the provincials for their Italian masters. We don't know for sure what he was thinking, and because he didn't live long enough to really oversee or see through his programs, it's hard to speculate on exactly what his motivations are. But he seems to have had some sense of trying to work on Romanizing overseas colonies and eliminating as much as possible the abuses that had been going on when Romans were managing various aspects of these provinces. Back at home, he increased the number of senators, so the Senate went from 600 to 900. He does this partly to accommodate a large number of new members from a range of social backgrounds, including Spain and Gaul. And partly this is to reward those who were loyal to him as he took control from the remaining Pompeians and over Pompey himself. There's a lot of pushback among the more aristocratic optimates who don't like seeing their power diluted, and don't like seeing all of these people of somewhat iffy social backgrounds from provincial backgrounds now being brought into the Senate. So there's a sense by sort of long-standing senatorial families that this is Caesar's payback for the Senate not supporting him. He increased the number of quaestors and praetors, so makes it easier to get on the cursus honorum, again diluting the power of the senatorial aristocracy and opening it up to people that were loyal to him. He exercises the right of nomination, which means that he can just name somebody to office. So nomination we think of as saying, I nominate Bob for president, but now they have to run for election. It just makes them a candidate. Well, in ancient Rome, nomination meant you won. There was no election. You were it. So he uses this right of nomination that he seizes sort of through his holding the office of dictator in order to do an end run around elections. So he basically decides who's going to hold office, who isn't. And again is able to put his own appointees, these are essentially political appointees, he's able to put his own people in various offices. He ignores the magistrates and tribunes and becomes in general disrespectful towards certainly the Senate, but even the Republic, and really views the Republic as an outdated, archaic dinosaur that has outlived its usefulness. And there is this sense sort of that Caesar now back in Rome in 45 is getting a little bit too big for his britches, that he's overstepping the line. Unlike Sulla, who held the dictatorship for a year, got things organized, pacified, and then stepped back into the consulship, Caesar's not doing that. And there is a lot of concern that he imagines himself to be a kind of king. Caesar fuels that concern by accepting honors that the Senate gives him. And there's some sense that the Senate was really laying it on in an effort to cause Caesar to alienate himself from his populist supporters, that they were giving him one honor after the other, all kinds of exceptional honors, unheard of honors, in order to make it clear to the people that this wasn't just your everyday Roman, this was somebody who was trying to be king, and to bring up that fear in the Romans. So Caesar has his image portrayed on coins, something that had never happened for a living Roman. He's worshipped as a living god. And again, this is something, Caesar himself isn't behind, but he allows to happen. And this was a Greek practice, so it wasn't unheard of, particularly among the elite, but it was something that was highly unusual in Rome. And there were also rumors that he wanted to be king, that he was going to take the title of Rex. And that was the rumor that really sort of made the people anxious, but certainly the Senate. And the Senate sort of increasingly felt like it needed to take action, that Caesar was out of control, and that he was basically abolishing every Republican institution or just overstepping it. And that if they allowed this to continue to happen, there would be no republic, that Caesar would just be king, and we would be back in a kind of abusive monarchy of the sort that Sextus Tarquin had. So here are some images of coins showing Caesar and being celebrated for his dictatorships, and Caesar allowed this to happen. So here are some review questions. I'll let you go over these, and when you're done with these questions, you're done with the lecture.